Um, Hello, everyone, and welcome to the panel discussion at the end of what has been an absolutely fantastic day. My head is absolutely full of so many thoughts and profound ideas that you've all given me. So thank you so much. Building a more confident, inclusive space. This is an opportunity now for our esteemed guests and others to answer the questions that were posed by members before today's session. So some of them do have an overlap. And then at the end, we'll have an opportunity to talk. And hopefully we will finish bang on 4 o'clock so that we can all enjoy a Saturday evening with some beautiful sun, hopefully. I want to again thank everyone who has taken part. You know, I've spoken a lot today, and I think Shelley will agree that that's not a new thing for me. But genuinely, none of this would be possible without an army of people behind the scenes. We've heard from the amazing speakers today, and I want to thank specifically Shelley, Mel, Karen, and Lana and Paul, who's not here. The expertise that you've brought will support people for years to come. Thank you so much. But also there's people that aren't here at the moment that have really been working behind the scenes, and I think a lot of the people at National Drama, so members, they are blessed with so many resources and so many things, but sometimes we don't give thanks to those that have put those together and made that possible. So the marketing team here have really done an absolutely exquisite job, and they do for every single event. And really, we would be nothing without them, because I can sit on Zoom and I can talk for an hour, but who wants to hear that? They make it somehow that it's things that people would want to come and see. So their propaganda skills are much valued, not just by us, by future generations. So thank you very much. I wanted to start off this panel discussion very much like I started off today's session with sort of like a confession. And for me, the confession was, and I hope that I'm not alone, that when I started teaching, I was so panicked by the need to do so many things that I created a hierarchy in my head. What was the most important thing that I needed to do? And then naturally at the bottom, what I did for SEND learners, they sat down there, and I was not providing something that was even close to a good quality of education for those pupils. And what was even worse is, my first few years observed by very experienced drama teachers, deputy heads and headmasters, and being told that I was an outstanding teacher. And yet that bit was missing. And I look back and I reflect on, my own teaching practice and going, actually, that was pretty poor. And I think that is part of the problem, is that it is seen as a niche area of education. But as we've said so many times, if you've met one autist, you've met an autist. The fact is that if you're not doing service by those learners, then it can't be outstanding, because you're missing out those people. It's not acceptable. So for me, I wanted to put this conference together, and it came out the back of a conversation with Anya, rest her soul, talking about the fact that when I said that, she said, don't be embarrassed. I imagine that everyone's had that moment, because we do. We live in a society where we tend to put people as an afterthought that are a little bit different. And that's not an excuse, but it's something we need to work on. And so putting this conference together has been sort of an 18-month vanity project, as it were, to try and sort of redress that balance. And I hope it will be a starting point, a springboard for going forward. When I talk about SEN, there's also a thing that I'm reminded of, a story from my past. I know we've heard from Lana's very exciting personal history, and I've been inspired to mention one of my own. I grew up in the Middle East, and there was one special needs school where I grew up. The Al Noor Centre for the Otherly Abled was the name of the school. It's since changed its name. It was a private facility, and in the Middle East, there's a cultural view that special educational needs doesn't really exist. There is a view that these are the hidden children, and they actually, in this case, they were hidden children. There was a lot of very, very powerful people in the government, lots of sheikhs whose sons or daughters would be autistic or would have Down syndrome, or, to show you a list of, all the things we've talked about today. And they weren't given their names. They weren't, Zaid bin al Maktoum al, they had no name. they were Ali, they were Mohammed, they were normal children, because the embarrassment that was connected with their names being associated with this family. But they weren't ignored, they weren't left, they had this fantastic school, there was lots of money. And I helped out there for several months. And there was a Somali occupational therapist. And it's very interesting that Shelley brought up the idea of the research into autism in Somalian culture. And I remember talking to him, and he said, I asked him, why is it that you do this job? I was 18. I said, why is it that you do this job? And he said, you can see here that money is not the solution. You see here a room of 20 of probably the wealthiest children in the world, and their fathers, are incredibly powerful. But what does the money get them? They are locked away in this room. They have no social interaction. They are left here. I come from the poorest country in the world. I come from a country that is currently at war. I am one of maybe 3 people that is trained to this level of a Somali background. I am doing more good here for those 20 children than I can do for 200 children back home. That's where the inequality lies. And that story really stuck with me. This idea of it's not always about the money, it's about the people. And it's about the importance of training. And then, linking that back to my own idea of I needed to be better. And so all teachers need to be better at doing this for all our learners. Because if we really want to big up the power of drama, we need to make our spaces inclusive. So with that sort of slightly emotional and hopefully thought-provoking start, we've got a couple of questions from the attendees today. And the first one is a really nice place to start, a very general idea. How can I make drama accessible and enjoyable for students with SEND? So does anyone want to jump in straight away with that quite meaty first question about making drama accessible? We don't need to all be so polite. Unmute yourself and jump in, panel members. Go for it. Yes, Lana.
I guess fully believe that I think that you are delivering and providing for that child what they need in that moment.
I think Eddie might have pulled out the socket or something.
Recording has stopped. Whoa, we're back.
Sorry, there's a technical error there. So yes,
I was channeling the voice.
Yes.
I was channeling that sexy voice.
Yes.
So I'll stop channeling that sexy voice. And yes, so I would say it's looking at what you've learned and being able to adapt and taking note of the needs of those children by understanding their needs and creating a relationship with them, because that was kind of the focus of what I was saying. And there will always be strategies that you can go to. And it's also about knowing, you're working with the person, not with their needs as well. I think that's also important as well, that you aren't defined by your needs or your challenges. Karen. And that's also a nice message of inclusivity.
Karen, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I would reiterate what Lana's just said as well about making connections with the young person. But I would also say it's about meeting them where they are and not expecting them to come to you where you are. And I mentioned this in my talk as well. It's about those small steps and layering things up, chunking everything right down and just adding little layer upon layer, bit by bit. And I'd also say it's about being playful. I really am a real believer on being, the crazy uncle that everyone loves, who actually got down on the floor and played with them and wasn't stuffy and sat in the chair, whatever, be that person that plays and plays alongside with them. and it will, I think it, in my experience, it does wonders.
I think it's very interesting we have Amanda here, because Amanda has a very different perspective. Those that don't know, she's involved with fomenting the next generation of drama teachers. In terms of that question there, sorry to put you on in the lurch, Amanda, there, about how drama can be accessible for students. How is, I'm imagining you and your bright-eyed and bushy-tailed ITT arriving in September. What is the...
They left yesterday, so we had our last day yesterday. So yes, they will be arriving soon in schools. That's right.
With that new teacher smell.
Well, we talk a lot. They all shared practice yesterday, so they all took turns in leading a bit of something that they've done in school that's worked particularly well, and it was quite a theme. This idea of child-centeredness, which is actually it's a very basic one, really, but rather than we're going to do Romeo and Juliet, you've got to be Capulet, you've got to be Juliet, you've got to be, this idea of we're all in this town. And who might you be? So this ability to sort of try and root it in something where they can actually be enrolled as themselves, but in a slightly different area, so that they decide how close to the self they are. And this is good as you've made this point several times today, that actually this is good for all learners. It's good for adults. Actors do it this way. You start off with, well, what would I be doing if I were in that sort of situation? Rather than, we're doing this play and therefore we'll cast it and we'll try and work it backwards from there. Try and working it from the inside out as a basic principle. That's quite a difficult one to explain to them in September, but they've really nailed it, because they realise it's so much quicker and easier to do it that way. And you get these lovely, authentic and unique performances and presentations and interpretations. And one of the students said this way, they forge their own cultural capital. So you're actually going back to what you were saying about equalities in the classroom, that they actually define their own background and approach to things. I also think with the ones who have done some work with some students who have special needs, is that they say, if you watch the ones with special needs who do love drama and really watch them, you will get a clue as to what it is that works, and it might work for others. And then there will be some for whom the opposite is the case. So actually learning to see the signals in your classroom, and then thinking, do I do more of that or do I try the opposite? And you just they have to keep playing. We were talking about play, they have to keep playing until they discover something. As I said earlier, there's no right or wrong, there's just discoveries. And you've got to be just as committed to that journey of discovery as you expect them to be, really. Does that answer the question?
Oh no, I think that was wonderful. It also links onto sort of a supplementary one that might be interesting, is that you talk, it was really interesting there, you're talking about experience, and from the teacher, the student teacher, that they learn that that's the most efficient way, and then therefore they find themselves, and it's that notion of discovery through being put in that situation. If you watch this learner, you will, and that kind of, the exploratory practice. Is then, again, none of us are policymakers, but there's a question there as a supplementary. When you do a nursing degree, or you do a degree like that, you're required to do certain rotations. If we look at our teacher training, you have your basically 2 schools, but those don't necessarily have to come under any kind of remit. Do we feel then, as a people that have worked with young people, that actually mandating a certain requirement of being, whether it be in a special classroom or having experience with learners with additional needs in a more what's a better way to phrase it, a more condensed way, rather than where you'd normally find them in a mainstream classroom dotted around, would that be something that would benefit teachers and therefore the teaching of SEN? Yes, Karen, sorry.
Something for anybody. Oh my God.
Yes. Sorry, I was just going to say, yes, I believe wholeheartedly that should happen. For Simon Floodgates, for his course at University of Reading, I've been running for years. And when Andy Kemp ran it, I ran one day where all the trainee teachers came over to me at my school for one day, and they all absolutely loved it and wanted more. And he said they all talked about it at the end of the year, how that was the day that really stood out to them, and they wanted more of that. And I would try and cram in so much in one day, because I think this is my chance. But I just think it's so important to do it. I really think it should be part of it. Teacher training.
At Goldsmiths, we have an enrichment week, and a lot of places put it at the end of the year, where I've always challenged its position, because what can it enrich? So I like to put mine between the two placements, because they've got nuts and bolts to try and get their heads through, up till Christmas. And then the beginning of January, that very first week, they can go to a special placement, and some go to a PRU, some go to special needs. Some of them have actually already been LSAs and know quite a bit, so they might go and do something slightly different. But they all say the same thing, that this has opened their eyes to mainstream teaching as well, that this isn't something that sits in a box and that doesn't percolate through. So I would absolutely say that I think that's and think carefully about where enrichment goes in the year, because
Lana,
then it enriches the second placement, which is what you want it to do.
Yeah, Lana, sorry, you wanted to come in there.
Muted.
I just wanted to say that I have, I have friends who used to live in South Africa, but also I've got family in Australia, so I know a little bit about, and I think that our teacher training is really lacking generally across the board in special needs. Even when I trained, if you wanted to be a special needs teacher, you had to do a whole nother year at university. And that's not unheard of in other places around the world. And I know from being in special needs schools, where there are some teachers who come to the special needs schools who have very little understanding of special needs. And it's quite unbelievable, where I've had to photocopy a whole bunch of stuff about autism and give them, say, you have an autistic child in your class, along with other sort of other kids who might have minor learning difficulties. And they're like, oh, I've never really worked with an autistic kid. And I'm thinking, but you're in a special needs school. How would you not have done any training on this? And I think there is a lack. And not because it makes you a better teacher, actually, when you have all the understanding.
I think that's
you
resonating
can't
quite a
train
lot
a special
through.
needs teacher anymore. It all got knocked on the head, which I think is an absolute crime, and it's long overdue to be realised.
I was just going to say, you can, at the school that I worked at, they train primary and special needs. There's a consortium, and you train in primary, and you train in one of 2 or 3 special schools in Reading in the local area. So you train as both. But it's fun. It's amazing.
This highlights the kind of ad hoc nature of it, where you'll get these pockets of excellence.
Not uniform.
And let's be frank and honest about this. There will be areas of disadvantage that is linked heavily to property prices and pushy parents and sharp elbows. That means that certain areas will do certain things. Sorry, Chris, you wanted to come in there.
Yeah, I was going to say, to do with the training of teachers, I think having an early experience of working with special needs children is very good for general teaching, because of the simplicity, clarity, not only of your language, but of your body language. Because I think special needs children read your body language as closely, possibly more closely than ordinary children who are more tuned to verbal language. Would be an excellent discipline for then carrying those kind of qualities into ordinary teaching, because I think they're important for all teaching. One of the things that struck me about, I worked with Dorothy Heskett in the 70s, and our first teaching experience was in a mental hospital with the children, special need, very, very, very special needs children in a hospital. And it was so challenging that some people didn't want drop for that. And that's when she was using teacher in role as her defining strategy with people, where two people are working with a role. And I was privileged enough to work with a derelict, Albert, a derelict, who was very, very non-verbal. And she said that was the important thing about the work, was that the children were picking up on all the non-verbal signals, and verbality didn't mean much to them unless it was very simple and directed. And I think that that's a key principle for teacher training.
I think also, I'm just conscious of time. This links quite nicely into the next question that we had, which was, what has been our most effective strategy or moment in the classroom? I think that's an interesting one, a sort of, maybe you think back to a moment or a strategy or something that stands out as a thing that go, yes, I will definitely do that again, or yes, that had a massive impact. Anyone want to jump in with that?
Yeah, I just want to say something about that. I think the most important thing I did was hand over control to the children in a certain situation, and they took it on from there. But the other thing I do want to just add to the last point is, as Lana said, if you're a good teacher of special educational needs, children with difficulties, however you want to call it, you will also be a really good teacher for every child. And the two things that should be fundamental, particularly in primary, but maybe in secondary too, is that SEN should be central to the curriculum and drama should be central. Everything should revolve around those two things because they're just such powerful things.
Sorry, Shelley, and then Zena, sorry.
And I hope that the baby doesn't do anything annoying. There's something that I wanted to mention that I forgot at the end of my presentation, which is basically my answer to this question about one thing that's made a big difference. And it's something that it took me years to learn. I never really got good at it in mainstream, and I sort of had to get good at it when I moved more into SEN, was waiting time. If there was one thing that I could tell other people they needed to work on, it was waiting time. So if I asked a question or gave an instruction, for a long time, I would expect a quick response and hopefully the right response very quickly. And it took me so long, but I've realized now it's so important. If I've asked something or given a piece of information, I have to wait longer than feels comfortable and then add about 15 seconds on. And then more often than not, something good will happen. And I was thinking of a student that I have in my class who I would be with if I wasn't with a baby all the time, who is very, very defiant and resistant, and all the things that a teacher would say are very, very bad. And he's got quite severe autism and all sorts of difficulties, and he will refuse to move, and he'll just put his face down on his desk and sit in his chair and refuse to move. And he's quite a heavy boy, so physically moving him isn't an option. Not that we're into physical things anyway, but if he's thinking, he's refusing to move and he's scowling and refusing to talk, but he's listening and he's thinking. And if I then ask him something or tell him, right, this is what we've got to do, or these are what your choices are, I've noticed with me or with another staff member, if we're expecting a quick response, then the quick response is usually just that something gets thrown at us or we're sworn at. But if we have a long period, or even just with any student, if we ask a question and oh, goodbye, whoever's going, Oliver. Okay, Oliver. With a lot of students, I found if I just wait 10 or 15 seconds, or even tell the student I'm going to wait for a while and you can have a bit of time to think, or maybe come back to that question in a minute, you get so much more. That's general good practice with all teaching. Just wait after you've asked a question, but particularly with our students with more severe learning difficulties or with any kind of language processing difficulty, it takes a long time just to process the words. Especially, I know I talk pretty fast sometimes. I use too many words when I could have said something more simply. That then takes a long time for the young person to process and think of an answer. So yeah, use less words and wait for a long time after asking a question. I've used a lot of words just then, so I'm going to stop. Oh, the irony.
Zena, sorry, you were gonna come in there.
First of all, I was going to say Roy and Vivienne for Prime Minister, maybe replacing Gavin. But secondly, that thing about creating an inclusive classroom. So that thing of creating, like if you're really lucky and you have great resources and you've got, you know, more staff in the classroom or smaller numbers, I think all of it is easier to manage and to give people time and to, but for, you know, if you're seeing, I don't know, 23 different groups of children a week in classes of 30, then I think there's something about interrogating your expectations. I think sometimes the pressure, and I think this year, because we've had to do everything on its head and stop, it's actually quite useful for how, you know, generally the pressure of education to be very narrow, to be all about standards, to be all about whatever that is, but to be about this, you know, quality of education has meant something very numerical. You know, even if you try to do process and you try to make a playful environment and, you know, there's a sort of a judgment, it's judgmental. So there's something about how do you create a culture in your classroom that is the culture you want, rather than it being a sort of reflection of the culture outside your classroom or mainstream or typical culture. So how do you make it kinder? How do you make it slower? How do you make it less about how many of us can reach level 6? And how do you make it more about, is everyone in your group included? Because, you know, I teach at a school with a certain demographic, and I don't know if you've read what's it called? Not Amazing Face, or it's about a boy who's got a deformed face and he goes to a mainstream school for a while, and the other parents are really foul about him. Do you know what I mean? Wonder. Yeah. And we get that attitude from the children because they live in the society that, you know, we live in, and they get the, I don't want to work, you know, if you let them. So if you don't let them, if you manage those expectations, so it's around inclusion and kindness and taking time and being playful and about the quality of the process, I've kind of not really, you know, I've changed some of the things that I, you know, around high expectations and blah, 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 and made it more about, are you all building each other's confidence in this room right now? And if you're not, that's not okay. And that thing of, are you letting the children choose their groups? Don't do that. You know, it's that, yeah, I don't know if you've ever been in those PE classes where the ones who are really like beautiful and good at PE choose the group, they select the groups, and all the, you know, the ethnic minority children and they're not very good at, and the SEND children are all, and the overweight children are left to the end. It's like, and that's mirroring the values that we don't want to share with children in the classroom. You're shaking your head, Karen. So it's something about creating the culture that we want just for that hour. So it's kind of, in this place, this is our safe space and we all have a voice. And a little bit, maybe interrogating your expectations about quality and all of those things, and just maybe just nuance, you know, rejiggling it a bit. So it's about, is there a space for everyone to have a voice and join in? Not, are we all going to, I don't know, You know, are we all going to create something that the world outside would go, oh, what a wonderful play. You've just made a play. Can I see a performance? You know, those sorts of misunderstandings that drive us so wappy. So something about creating a culture that you want in your classroom. Does that make sense?
No, I think that's very interesting because it's part of as all these things tend to be, and it will link to the third question I've got here. These are definitely wider issues that come to the fore when you start to think about individuals. It's the same thing that happens when you knee-jerkly try to think about inclusivity in terms of decolonizing the curriculum. If that's done as a knee-jerk response, then it's not a genuine. What it becomes is it becomes a tokenistic act, and in that tokenistic act, you end up creating a very artificial space. And if we go back to what has been repeated maybe 3 or 4 times today, is that actually it is the truth and the honesty, the honest approach, and it's the human interaction that makes the learning work best. I mean, I wrote down here, Zena, from what you were saying, this seems to be kind of like a running problem in arts education. What is its purpose? Is it a product-driven or a process-driven? I don't mean process-driven in the sort of process drama sense. I mean, is it about what is the values that we instill in our classroom? Is it about the process of making and discovery? That's what we value. Or is it the product, the thing that can be objectively measured is what we're valuing? Now, you know, we'd like to think where we'd sit naturally on that spectrum, but we have to also be realistic that, you know, many of these strategies that we are sort of clinging to as being great are as a means of reacting to the fact that we still have to be product driven. If we have a GCSE class, they must perform to a certain standard. If you're in a school that has performance management, your pupils must maintain this level of progress. Or parents have an expectation, oh, they're doing drama, so therefore there must be a play that must look like this. So it seems that the wider discussion that is happening, like you say, Zena, about culture with the small c in this case, is a wider discussion about actually what we value within our classrooms. And I think it links to another thing that we were talking about, differentiation. There was a fantastic talk that came out of one of the Ofsted looks at the new framework about this idea of differentiation, and the classic idea that differentiation is not just coloured worksheets, but differentiation is the expectation that pupils will have the same outcome, but it will be the individual support that is provided in the learning space that will get them to that outcome. Which, if you pull that apart, it effectively means all students should be getting 9s at GCSE, teacher must now work harder in order to do that. Now, that inherently sort of shows a bias within the expectations that are being set, because the reality is not everyone can be a gold medalist in the 100 meters. Not everyone can win the Tony Award. You know, when you measure things by success, there inherently has to be winners and losers, which feels like an odd place to come in a conference about inclusivity. But if we're talking about the overall culture, I think it must be mentioned. Sorry, Zena, you had your hand up.
No, I absolutely. And I think sometimes that does, you know, unconsciously or consciously, because we are a product of the world that we live in, and they are the, you know, we all just, you know, have been informed by those values. An A-level or a BTEC classroom, that ability to work well and have an expectation that you must work well with everybody in your cast, in your group, actually enables better work that is then assessed, you know, so better performance, better devising, better ability to play a character and write an essay about it, or, you know, or whatever it is. So, but I think there is a fear that, you know, makes you more limited in your teaching approach and maybe more elitist, that is linked to everyone must make this progress, everyone must be brilliant to an outside view, everyone. But, you know, there's something about managing expectations and inter-peer relationships, and that maybe is a bit of a risk, you know, that maybe is somebody comes and looks at your classroom and they go, you know, they might have challenging questions around that, but, you know, that you can't really, I don't think you can differentiate in the drama classroom unless your classroom is inclusive. And I've definitely run into problems when I failed to do that.
I think
completely
it's a
honest.
fair point, and I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to move on to the next thing.
Sorry, yeah, I'll shut up.
No. It's exactly, it links in thematic. It's almost like we planned this. Amanda has raised a really important thing where she's mentioned again this idea of we're not challenging GCSE. There are other options out there. You know, you've got vocational courses. You've got a whole plethora of, if we have to measure them with some kind of certificate, there are options out there. You know, results may vary. One thing that also links back to what Zena was saying is, as a school that runs both vocational and what's crudely called academic subjects, you do find a lot of backlash from parents when it comes to this term vocational. And that is not the fault of the exam boards. That is a wide, again, cultural view of vocational education and academic education, and this sort of, in other countries, the debate is very different. I will always point to Germany as an example of, you know, this term vocational education isn't some kind of dunce option. It goes back to when we had technical colleges and we look at this idea of, oh, you're not good enough to go to a grammar school, therefore you go to oh, you're not good for that, all right, you go and bang some wood for a little while. So we in our society have got this hierarchy of educational providers and therefore the certificates that they have. This links almost beautifully and seamlessly into the third question, which is which label or use of language, if you could, you would relegate to the trash bin of drama education history? What would it be? The thing that you'd want to banish, your room 101. Oh, come on, we're drama teachers. We have supposed to have so much, you know, fire and ire in our hearts, so many things to throw in the bin. What would be the word, the phrase, or the...
Drama's great for non-academic children. That's a phrase, not a word. So I hate the phrase academic, I think. That would be the phrase, academic. It's a rubbish phrase. It's meaningless twaddle.
Amanda? Sorry, you're on mute. Obviously, it's so offensive that you've muted yourself.
This is a skills-based lesson.
Excellent.
Mine would be, it doesn't matter, so-and-so can teach it. It's okay, you just need to give her the lesson plan.
Okay, excellent. Karen, what's your room 101?
I think mine that I've heard quite a lot is drama won't work with these kind of kids.
Nice.
They won't do drama. I've had that millions and millions of times.
Love it, love it. Mel, do you have a thing you'd assign to the trash bin of educational history?
Oh my goodness. Okay, it's more of a thing than a word. This is totally off the top of my head. I'm not a drama teacher. It would be the Velcro TA. The actual Velcro TA themselves, not the term. It's quite a good term to describe something that needs to not happen. How important it is that all of us, as I said, you know, we're all teachers are teachers of children with SEND, and this idea that there's one person who you go to who, oh, they can deal with that. So sorry, that's more of a concept than a word.
I'm glad.
Can I have another word? Can I have another word? Can I cheat?
Go on then.
I would actually like to get rid of the word special. Just saying.
Interesting. Shelley, what would you get rid of? Don't say me. That would be really.
That's right. I also can't think. So I'm going to say something that Mel said to me a little while ago. I'm going to steal what Mel could have had as her answer.
Disorder.
No, not disorder. Referring to children with special needs or additional needs, or whatever Lana says I should say now, referring to children with additional needs as well, like SEN kids kind of generically, whereas and this has nothing to do with kind of labeling them, it's actually grammar. I'm a grammar Nazi. I want to say children with SEN or children with additional needs, children with AEN, literally, because I'm a grammar Nazi. So it's nothing to do with, and there is an issue with labeling students and going, oh, that kid's got SEN. and that means there must be lots of things wrong with them, but actually it's just that it irks me because there's no such thing as a special educational needs kid, but there is a kid with additional needs or special needs, and mine is a grammar Nazi thing. And that's
I think language informs so much of what we do. Let's not get into the Chomsky view of language, but I think that's quite interesting, the idea of with. If you were to switch it, for instance, let's imagine that we replace this entire conference with not the word send or send learners, but with diabetes. How would that change societal view and expectations? Right? Think about everything we've talked about now and how absurd in some regards it would sound, just from a purely linguistic perspective. Oh, that
child who's got diabetes.
He's got diabetes. They can't do drama, they've got diabetes. It would buffer with us, but it seems that because send is a very big area with lots of things in it, that we kind of, in its complexity, we sort of give it a pass. We sort of go, it's very confusing, it's very big, therefore fine, I'm not going to get into that can of worms. So yes, I think that's quite interesting, the with thing. Yes, Shelley, sorry.
Can I ask Lana to go back to special, because I can think of why the word special is problematic, but what about special irks you, Lana?
I think in general the word irks me, like special this or special that. And I just want to say I think that's what it is. I kind of just want to say, do you know what? We're all special in our own little way. That's my corny take. I don't know. I've never really liked the word special. It kind of implies, because that's exactly what it does. And I know it's important to understand people's needs, but it's making it very, you're so special. I can't explain.
I think there's
maybe it's just in me.
So Lana, in the chat, there's some is just mentioned here that observed last week by SLT and saying that it was easy to teach drama and be graded outstanding, and that's sort of totally degrading those years and years of experience.
That is shocking. I want to take that SLT and show him how to create trees.
I'm so glad that you said shocking, because I was worried what you were going to say there.
Oh, never. I have a special way of talking.
Again, really conscious of time. I'll move to the final one, which is actually a nice way to end. We've sort of had our moment of one. Sorry, Mel. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Sorry, just a really quick one. I want to throw work in the bin, please.
Yes.
The word work in school. We can replace it with learning. That's okay. But that whole thing about your work is more important than your play. If we get rid of that word work, that will kind of solve that problem. And let's combine play and learning together. So I want work in the bin, please.
I think also that's a fairly grammar one as well, because it's technically not work. It's if you're going for a purely kind of Marxist view of things, that is not generating anything. Your ability to do that math sheet is not counted as work. There's no monetary value to that one there. So
no one's paying
you're absolutely
you.
right. I think work is needs to be replaced purely because Shelley will be angry about its grammar connotations. The final question here we've got, like I said, is a nice positive ending after we've had our ire. How do we get a love of drama across to all learners? I think that's a nice way to end with an inclusivity there. How do we get that love of drama back? I mean, not just a post-COVID as an issue, but more generally. I think this is something that Karen was saying, these kids aren't good for drama, or the idea that, the boys won't like this. We lose a lot of those kind of labelings where we say these things can't be done, which is almost like a tacit response that there isn't a love of drama there, therefore we don't try. So anyone want to go? Zena.
I just think it's about making it relatable. Making it relatable to the youth of today, as much as a technophobe and non-gamer person as I am. And I think if I was a teenager now, I'd still be reading a book. I'm not really interested in screens, but many of our children are. And working on screens and playing games is beautifully autistic friendly. I mean, Silicon Valley is probably full of men and women who have autistic trait. I mean, it's beautifully sit by yourself. You don't have to, but it is about engaging in something else, but not necessarily with a human. But it's about those, games have characters, they have stories, they have narratives. And I think when I've tried to engage with kids, it's about saying, oh, why don't you tell me a little bit about the characters or the stories that you're gaming with? Because I'm a little, I'm so old I don't really understand it, and I would just sort of encourage them. So I think it is about making it relevant to the teenagers of today who are quite different to my experience of being a teenager. So it's just about relating it to what's happening now in the world.
Karen, sorry, you wanted to come in there.
I was just going to say, for me, it's about, in my experience of what I've done, it's about getting in there with the young people and showing them my love, and giving them all the energy and the kind of passion and just everything in that, doing it with them. And that's kind of made them love the subject, because I'm in there showing them how much I love the subject and enjoying it with them. I also think that Key Stage 3 drama could be used differently in mainstream. I think it could be about so much more about developing social skills and making friendships and teaching them how to initiate friendships and repair friendships, and just get a sense of belonging and a sense of their own identity and all of that. I just think it could have a completely different purpose. But I feel bad saying that because I haven't been in mainstream really, so I feel bad saying it to people who are in mainstream, because I could just be talking.
No, I think, and it links to what Zena said here about saying play, and make content represent something of the lives of the learners. I think that goes back to, I'm now forgetting who said it, Amanda.
Lana.
It was someone who said about our history is inherently linked with storytelling, and drama is a medium, is fundamentally a very universal medium of exploring our world. If we get into the kind of how does early human express things, well, it's through mythical tales, and it's through that explorative look of the world. I am that person, I need to explain to you what I have seen, and the Key Stage 3 comment, I think, is a fair cop for drama. But then, as a mainstream teacher, I would argue it's all well and good for us to talk about all these high-minded aims, but if we're measured by Key Stage 4 and 5 results, we need to somehow spiral in also the things that the exam boards value as important. And I remember Antti Kemp was talking about the problem that he sees now in drama education is the over reliance on practitioners as a measure of success for your criteria. What equals a good performance? Well, it's one that's got these 10 techniques in there. That's a fantastic piece of drama. Forget story, forget character development. As long as you've done these 2 frantic assembly things, 3 paper birds things, and I think that leads to a buffering problem that we talked about before: process or product. Is it about understanding your world, getting young people to be confident to explore their world, or is it to create a brilliant piece of drama that everyone gets really excited about because the product is fantastic? So yes, Karen, I think the it's a good finger to point at Key Stage 3 drama, but I think the link is which is chicken or egg in that case. Amanda, you wanted to say something?
I think Chris had his hand up first.
Sorry, Chris.
Yeah. Just to go back one question, my dustbin word would be freeze frame. It leads on to why I would say that. I think it's just a get out clause for doing nothing of consequence, really. You have to be more articulate about what you mean when you want the class to actually depict something, whether it's a portrait or whether it's a photograph or whether it's a still video. Just saying freeze frame is just nowhere land, and it leads to some very sort of unthought through practice. And that connects with what I was going to say on this topic, to do with improvement. Ideally, I think there are teachers who combine the two, that they are very driven by the process of learning in drama and can produce good productions through that process, not separate from it, but by doing that, like a rehearsal process, produce a production. I think Daniel Schindler is one such person. He's always been in that mode. But what I would say is, for ordinary classroom practice, that the attention to the second dimension, no matter what you are doing in theory, you know, like your storyline, attention to the second dimension, that is, what is actually going on and why is it relevant to the children at the stage they're at, to do with the psychology of, say, the Key Stage 3 child, when they're doing, say, Macbeth. What's in it for them to explore? What is it about this scene that will trigger something that they'll want to talk about and share, to do with an experience that they can bring to this and exploit that? Like how it feels to want to murder somebody might be something that would be very sort of relevant, but attention to that details, that when you're not just teaching Macbeth, you're teaching about the human experience that would lead people to want to murder, is how I would say it, and much more attention in the curriculum to those kind of issues, which I think then leads to, by sort of induction, leads to some of the social awareness and social equalization, because what you find is some kid who doesn't normally speak suddenly gets triggered into saying something because they're so caught up with this, and you get all these kind of surprises because you've paid attention to the second dimension.
Thank you. That's enlightening, and actually a very interesting way to think about, you know, the value that we place on activities for pupils as well. Amanda, sorry, you were going to say something.
Well, first of all, I want to second Chris's putting in the bin freeze frame, personally, because it's a media term rather than a theatre term, and I would say we should be talking about image theatre, really. If we're going to be looking at it through Beau Allen, then you get to something deep and it addresses the issues that he was talking about, if you want to go through the practitioner lens. But I was always very reminded by stuff that I did when I was at college, which is, why does man or woman or humans make theatre in the first place? And this is essentially about explaining our world to ourselves and the fragility of our human condition. And this is why you can always do Macbeth, you know, in all sorts of different ways. How essential is it? This is deeply ingrained, really well-rooted philosophical thinking. And if you do all the second dimension sort of stuff that Chris was just talking about, doing the drama, the Heathcote way, the process, you will actually generate extremely good theatre. And yes, there's always a time and a place for a skills-based lesson where you want to polish things up a little bit and do something like that. But I always found, I taught drama for 15 years, I always found that actually my students discovered and made their own theatre devices. They actually created their own theatrical pieces. I never taught split screen, split stage. There's another one. They just discovered it for themselves because it was the way they had to do what they wanted to express. And that gives them complete ownership, and it's empowering. And in some ways, the further away you go from the GCSE requirements, the more likely you are to get to them being really well met in a truly embedded, valuable way that will stick with a child for life.
All roads lead to areas of study, I think, is the ending there. I'm just conscious of the time. So I think we've come to the end of that fantastic panel discussion. Zena, as our esteemed Vice Chair of National Drama, I leave the final word to you.
Massive thanks to you, Chris, for this, for your, what did you call it? Your vanity project. So good job. I can't wait for your next vanity project, so long as it's not building a shed. Amazing. And a massive thank you. I know I didn't get to all of the sessions, but a massive thank you to all the speakers. The things I heard have just made me really reflect and think about how I can, what is working and what I could do better in my classroom. And I think that's why these things are sort of so valuable, because, none of us, I certainly don't get it right all day, every day. And this sort of helps me to move forward without beating myself up or, there's sort of having a lesson observation feeling. But it's, we're all on, it's a horrible phrase, a journey that should be banned as well. But, like the children, we're kind of, it's not we arrive and then we've arrived. It's we keep learning and we keep changing. And so it's really helped me to reflect. There are phrases there that I've never even heard of. And I've thought of children in my classroom and gone, oh my God, that makes complete sense. Why didn't I know that before? So, massively thank you to those. Just amazing. I think your last sort of comments, Amanda, about ownership and empowerment are really pertinent, because that is really important. So, something about who we're sending out in the world and what qualities we're sending them out with. And I don't, I'm sure if Wyn Jones was here from Educast, he would say that is what he wanted for GCSE students, is for them to feel like makers, and not for them to feel like a little number on their forehead, but for them to feel like makers who've been through this amazing sort of learning 2 years with excitement and mistakes and errors and all of that. And, some amazing stories and amazing playwrights and things. So thank you very much. Yeah, it is, Shelley. I hope that this, that you can support National Drama. I know many of you are members and all of that already, but do talk to people that you work with, that that are friends from college, about what we're doing. There's this sort of educational side, but there's also celebrating good work, there's publishing, there's support for teachers, there's links with theatre, there's opportunities for people to get involved. And there's also a sort of campaigning side as well, where we've, on the website, on ND Resources, where we've, challenged the halving of funding at post-18 education, where we've gone, actually, where is that arts premium, that you promised? I thought, oh, it's vanished. And I think it's really important that that voice is there, and it's only strong if you guys support it. So keep supporting ND, and massive thank you to you lot.
Can I see if there's a possibility for the work today to find some form of publication?
Yes, we have a resource putting together.
Would you?
We'll forward that on.
Is it worth thinking about what kind of publication would be good?
We will have a chat about that at a later date.
I think it's worth publishing, basically, in whatever form.
Okay, we will do. All right, I will now, for the final time this afternoon, we will say goodbye to my beautiful assistant,